Hi folks. Well, sometimes I wonder if I should be calling these videos van conversion hacks instead of just a documentary about building the van, because in particular this is the second video about my trip report. It's the second part of my trip report, and in this one I show you a few of the electrical hacks that I had to do on the van. Invariably you find yourself, you don't have something, or in order to do something you're going to have to order a part from Amazon, and then it's going to be a couple more days until you get it. So this is one way that I coped with an issue of sizing of connectors and my power cord and a few other things. And the other thing that I'm doing in this video is showing you how I configured a mobile workshop for van conversion. Now this is something that is really much easier to do if you're building with aluminum as opposed to wood. And I'll show you why. I'll show you basically the bare minimum set of tools that you need in order to work pretty well, and why it is advantageous to, if you're on the road, or if you don't have a lot of room, you don't have a big garage full of drill presses and miter saws and all kinds of stuff like that, how you can do a lot on the road, just with a small number of tools. So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy it. I spent a good part of July building and installing these control panels. I had one on the driver's side, or actually I had two on the driver's side and one on the passenger side, which controlled all of the lights, the plugs, and the battery monitoring and inverter control equipment. And one thing that struck me was that we spend a lot of time talking about the right cabling size for distributing electrical 12-volt electricity all over the van, and I think a fairly standard cable size to use is number 12 for doing that. Basically the idea is that you want to minimize the voltage drop in this DC system, because when you've got a low voltage like 12 volts, that means that for a high wattage appliance, you're going to have a large current, and if you have a large current, you've got a large voltage drop. So oftentimes the limiting factor in choosing the conductor size for distribution is not really the ampacity or the ability of the conductor to carry current at a low temperature, but the ability to carry that load at a low voltage drop. And hence we use number 12 as a result. So I used number 12 all over my van, and it worked out fine, except that when you get to these little devices here, these switches and these DC plugs, when you buy them, oftentimes they come with cabling with them. For example, the DC plug comes with a small conductor, and then you get the message from the manufacturer that it's intended that this plug be connected using this size wire, which looks like it's about like a number 16 perhaps. And in truth, it's really difficult to connect number 12, or that large distribution cable, to these small devices, these small switches and small plugs. And hence I found myself having the problem of trying to marry the small spade sizes of the switches and the plugs with the number 12 distribution cable. And basically what I did was I created little pigtails at the device, where I connected the device using the smaller conductor, 16 or 14, whatever it is, and then I made a splice to connect into the number 12 to distribute around the van. And the trick is to do that safely and securely. So this is one trick that I found for doing that. First you separate the spade connector from its surrounding sleeve, and then you
thread your cable through the sleeve, through the connector, and you wrap it around the stab of the switch. Now notice that you can only do this because the smaller conductor, the number 16, fits entirely within the barrel of the connector. And that's because the barrel of the connector was sized for number 12 wire. But if you get a connector which is sized with a barrel size for number 12, the clip is too large to hang on to those small switch or plug stabs. Then you can combine these all together, and when you do that, it creates a pretty secure connection there. Now once you have that little pigtail, you have to connect it to your 12-volt wiring. So now I'm joining the small pigtail conductor with the larger number 12 conductor, and the system here is basically to wrap your number 12 conductors all together around that that splice of the large conductor with the small conductor. You crimp them with a Buchanan or a that's what we used to call them back in the day, but that little copper sleeve there, you crimp that down good. You tape it as best you can, and then you use the heat wrap to basically make sure that the tape doesn't come off of that joint and to secure the whole connection. It creates a pretty good joint. So I've got all my number 12s coming in on one side, and then out of the other side comes a little pigtail that I can use to connect to my device, and then it creates a sort of a small bus connection there for anything that I want to join all together in one splice. And one just little side note for anyone who's cringing at the fact that I'm combining these conductors with all of these different colors, green and black and etc., etc. I'm not paying any attention here. I just picked a bunch of scrap number 12 wire that I had in the box and smaller wire that I could show how to create the joint. So don't pay no attention to the combination of colors that are being combined here. Here's kind of an interesting innovation that I came with regarding my power cord. Now I need to connect shore power to the inverter, and based on the size of everything, I might have been able to get away with number 12 cable to do that. However, what I decided to use was number 10, and so I bought number 10, and the reason why is because I also need a cable to remotely connect my PV panel to my charge controller in the situation where I want to park in the shade and then put my PV panel over in the sun, maybe up to 40 feet away. And I want to use the same cable to do that. All right, so how do you do that? Well, first of all, I created this power cord, which is the AC power cord. Basically, I plug it in to shore power. I plug it into a receptacle associated with my inverter, and I've got power. But now to convert that cable into my remote PV panel cable, I created two connection cords. One to plug into my PV panel and then into one end of my power cord, and one to connect the other end of my power cord with the rooftop jack that I originally had my PV panels connected into. So this way I can relocate my PV panel far away, and I use this cord. Now this cord, notice that I combine two of the conductors, the black and the green conductor there, to form one side of my DC circuit, and then the white is the other side of my DC circuit. So I have basically half the resistance of the entire circuit, or I have half of the resistance of the white part of the circuit in the other one, because I have the black and the green one in parallel. Now, so I can minimize the voltage drop, and I've determined that probably, a number 10 is probably enough for my DC connection anyway. So I'm in pretty good shape here as far as voltage drop, and also as far as ampere capacity, and that way I don't have to carry around a separate cord for remotely locating my PV panels versus a cord for connecting to shore power. So I was able to eliminate one whole heavy cord that way. One of the things that occurred to me as I was gone for 5 or 6 weeks and wanting to work on the van was that it really doesn't take very many tools to build with aluminum as opposed to wood. And the material itself doesn't take up much room. I mean, consider a 2x4 or even a 1x2 compared to a piece of angle aluminum, which is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1/8 inch. You have that strength, but you don't have the volume of the materials. And then, one of the tricks that kind of anchored this idea in my head was when I happened upon this idea of using my angle grinder as a mini table saw. Now, this mini table saw is used to cut mostly aluminum angle or flat pieces, and it's constructed just by bolting a couple of L-shaped pieces of flat aluminum to my box and then getting a hose clamp and attaching it to the brackets. It's pretty easy. In fact, just as an aside, this box was probably one of the most useful things that I brought on my trip. I discovered that right away when I had to, take my PV panel, take it off of the roof, put it inside the van to investigate my rattle noise, and I discovered that I could put it on edge, and then I could reach just about any place on the roof, and then I discovered that I could use it as the angle grinder, and it was something that I didn't think about bringing. I just threw it in at the last minute. It was actually the original purpose of it was to carry my pooches, on my bicycle, but when it got too heavy to do that, then I decided to bring it along. One of the other uses for it was basically to act as a stoop, next to my bed when I had to get out in the middle of the night. When you got a dog that is jumping on your chest in the middle of the night, and that means that she either has to pee very badly or she has to throw up, you're looking for a quick exit out of the van. And to have my flip-flops sitting on the stool just right outside of the sliding door on the passenger side there was really handy. So, that box was probably the most useful thing that I had in the whole trip. Okay, so as another quick aside, another use for this little box is right here. You might be wondering what those nails are velcroed to the side of the box. Well, here is a picture of a dog poop bag that I can attach to the box, and although I really don't like pooping in the van, if I am forced to, then this is an easy utilization of that box for that purpose. So enough said about that, I guess. Getting back to the tools, I just wanted to mention a few more things about this angle grinder. An angle grinder is probably one of the most useful tools you can have. It's very small. It takes less than 1,000 watts to run, so you can run it through your inverter. They're cheap. At Harbor Freight, you can buy one for, I think, between $15 and $20. You can cut just about anything. This blade I bought for $13 from Amazon. It's a diamond blade which will cut anything which is basically non-ferrous. In other words, it's not intended to cut steel or iron or stainless steel, but it'll cut just about anything else. It'll cut PVC, it'll cut wood if you need to, it'll cut plastic, it'll cut anything. So it's really a very versatile tool. Now, having said that, it's also one of the most dangerous tools. So you should really respect an angle grinder and be sure to wear the correct eye protection, hearing protection, wear gloves, and even breathing protection in many situations, because it will produce some very fine dust. And I learned that sort of the hard way when I breathed in some PVC dust that I thought I was going to have for the rest of my life, but finally was able to get rid of it. In any case, an angle grinder is really a useful tool to have. So here's a collection of some of the most useful tools that you can bring along for your portable workstation. First, I mentioned the angle grinder. You should also have a cordless drill. Now, the advantage of a cordless drill is that you can charge that battery with your PV panel. If you're working with aluminum, you should have a non-oil based greaser for drilling and tapping holes. So you should also have, a couple of drill bits. You don't need a lot. I found that the most useful drill bits and taps are an 1/8 inch and a 3/16 inch drill, and then a tap for a 8/32 screw and a 1/4 inch screw. You also need a rivet tool and also a rivet nut installer. Okay, those are handy to have. Of course, you should have some tape. You should have some drill bits. This little gadget here allows you to hold your drill at 120-degree offset from your drill bit, which I have found really handy for a variety of screwing and drilling operations, so that I don't have to have a whole bunch of little items or a right angle drill or whatever else. To drill big holes, a couple of these drill bits here, which you can drill in and you can enlarge the hole as you drill farther in. You should have a good collection of clamps. You always need clamps. This screwdriver was really sort of a bit of whimsy for me. These things cost about $50, but on Prime Day I was able to get one for about $20, and I treated myself, which allows me to have a lot of different types of screwdriver in one screwdriver. Some bits, a good headlamp is essential. You need some gloves. You should have a box of disposable gloves working with aluminum, because you don't want to expose your hands to all that aluminum all the time. You should have some good knee pads, a good breathing protection, of course eye protection, hearing protection, and of course you should have some measuring instruments. So you should have, I found it useful to have a large square, which is basically that shelf bracket, which gives you a nice right angle for large distances, and then a carpenter's square, a caliper, a electrical meter, and a small level are very handy. Now all these tools, boy, I'm a big fan of Harbor Freight. If you're a pro and you're using these, day in, day out for years and years, maybe you want higher quality tools, but Harbor Freight has a lot of really good tools. They may not last as long as the tools that cost 3 or 4 times the amount, but they do the job pretty well. So I'm a big fan of Harbor Freight. And there are a couple of things that I forgot to put in here which are really obvious. You need a good cutting knife and you need a good tape measure. All right, and so that's pretty much what I've decided are the essential tools for a mobile workshop. I just want to say that in these videos, I want to emphasize that I'm not pretending to be an expert here. Okay, I'm making mistakes. I'm making the same mistakes that I think that you would make. The advantage for you is that I'm making them first. So please keep that in mind when you're looking at the videos, and just understand that you should take everything that I say with a grain of salt. Check up on it, use your own judgment, and with that I hope you're getting something out of it.